the same questions that I think you all have are the ones that I've been trying to answer for myself and for my students. So this is a micro webinar. We're going to be as efficient as possible with our time. We're going to kind of run through why formative data is so important, how you can collect it quickly and efficiently, and then what tools are available. And then we're going to wrap up with about 10 or 15 minutes of some tutorial videos looking at 4 possible options. So Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, Go Formative, and Google Forms. You may have had some practice or interaction with some of these products, but you may not have had practice with all of them. So I wanted to give folks a chance to get a look at what these products can do, and then think for yourself how they might apply to your particular scenario as a teacher or an administrator. We'll also have time at the end for Q&A, so anything throughout the session that comes up, you can either throw it in the chat window or hold it for that Q&A time at the very end. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. Why do we need formative assessment data? Well, without data, you're really just making assumptions, particularly in a time of distance or hybrid learning, when you don't have your students face-to-face and you can't read their body language. Formative assessment is that much more important, not only from an academic sense to find out if they're keeping up with the material and if they're understanding what you're sharing, but I think more importantly, in the way that I have prioritized my formative assessment data is social emotional check-ins with students to find out just how they're doing. What are they bringing into the school day? What's going on in their home environments that may be impacting what they are bringing either to my virtual classroom or now that I'm back in school to my in-person teaching. So I'm going to approach this from 2 angles, since I know we have a couple different audiences. There's ways in which obviously teachers need formative assessment data to track their students and inform their instruction and maintain engagement with students. But there's also kind of the other side of that coin for administrators, how they can gauge the sentiment among their staff members, how they can prioritize agenda items for staff meetings, how they can explore possible options or reach consensus with their staff. And then certainly we're all zoomed out. And so how can administrators use a variety of formative data collection tools to make their presentations and meetings more engaging, so that we're not just clicking through PowerPoint slides without a sense of what our audience is thinking and feeling. So that's our why. How can I quickly collect data? Well, there's a variety of tools that we're going to explore today. The 4 are Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, Go Formative, and Google Forms. These can each be used, I think, by both teachers and administrators. There are features built within both that might lend themselves more to one type of engagement over another, depending on what type of assessment data you're trying to get, and then how quickly you're trying to make that data actionable. I think as you see when we go through some tutorials, there are some that just lend themselves more to live instruction where students are responding to questions, and as a teacher, I'm immediately seeing those results and being able to respond accordingly by putting them into small groups or breakout rooms according to those responses. Versus something like Google Forms, which is kind of a survey tool that collects data and that is easier to process live, but is maybe easier to act on when you have a bit of time and space between when you are offering the assessment and when you are acting on the data that comes from that assessment. Another one we're going to look at is Mentimeter, which again is applicable in both an instructional and administrative context, where you're trying to sort of gauge sentiment and act quickly on what you're hearing from your audience. So we've got our why, we've got our how, and then certainly our what. What tool should I use? Well, we don't know which tool to use until we think specifically about the purpose and the audience. So from a teaching standpoint, am I using this tool to inform my lesson right now? Am I using this tool to inform planning for future lessons, or the ways in which I'm going to put student groups together? Or am I informing my heart? So am I informing what's going on with my students beyond academics, which, as I mentioned before, is my priority right now, knowing that my students have been at home for so long and isolated for so long. that's had an effect on them that I really want to be sensitive and responsive to. So additionally, the other side of this coin, what tool should I use, depends on who your audience is. Are you engaged primarily with students or with teachers, parents, colleagues? And then do you want the data to be visible or not? So if a student puts a response into a tool, is that data that you want everyone to be able to see, or just you? And so kind of that privacy element too, where you can offer a formative assessment tool that just gives you a kind of a temperature check on the room versus a formative assessment tool where you can pin specific responses to specific individuals. So depending on your audience, different tools for different outcomes. So the 4 formative tools that we're going to look at today, there's Go Formative, which I think of and I use in a more traditional formative assessment sense. It's free for up to 40 students at a time. There's a library of existing assessments that you can use. And then there's a variety of question and response types. So it's not just multiple choice. It's not just fill in the blank. You can have students record responses. You can have students write kind of more long form responses. And then from an assessment side, you can see live how individual students are responding. So if it's a multiple choice question, you can see green for correct, red for wrong. As they're doing short response, you can see what they're typing and get a sense real quickly. Is this something they're responding to? Is this something that they're understanding? Or do I know that I've got a specific group that I need to work in a breakout room with or to follow up later with? So from a traditional formative assessment sense, I'd say Go Formative is the surest bet. If you're trying to duplicate in a virtual space what you would be seeking in an in-person space. Poll Everywhere is ideal for feedback during presentations. I like it because it's friendly for all kinds of devices. They can be on a computer, they can be texting, and then it embeds well with PowerPoint, Keynote, or Google Slides. And what that does is allow you to pose a question in a format like this on a Zoom, and then immediately see as students or administrators or teachers respond. You can kind of see exactly what those responses look like and respond accordingly. So Poll Everywhere embeds with a variety of presentation tools, but it is free. And I think for educators, they're offering kind of a higher level of their traditional offerings at a discounted rate. Another one that is free that folks may or may not be familiar with is Google Forms, which has a more traditional kind of survey or quiz format. But again, there's multiple choice options. There's short response, long form response. You can embed photos as well. For kids of a certain age, I work with 11 and 12-year-olds, and they love like little animated GIFs or GIFs or however you pronounce it. You can embed those, and that makes things more engaging for students. And then there's Mentimeter, which I think is ideal for feedback during presentations. And primarily, I could use this with students, but I think about it more when I'm presenting with colleagues, where we're trying to make a decision quickly on the fly in terms of how we should prioritize our time, how we should organize our agenda. You'll also see from the tutorial video that Mentimeter has cool animations and is very visually engaging and pleasing to the eye. So that's kind of the quick overview of these tools. We're trying to make this a micro webinar. So rather than me go through each one of them, I've put together a series of tutorial videos that'll give you a sense of how each one of these works in an education environment. So those videos are available. You can see the timestamp for kind of how long it would take to watch each of these. I think we can probably maybe watch all of them depending on how familiar you are or unfamiliar you are with some of them. But if we watch all of them, it would only take about 15 minutes. And my thinking was we could go watch the tools and then come back with questions about individual tools or kind of collectively how we might organize formative assessment data for students or for colleagues. So at this point, I'm going to kind of cut everyone loose for a choose your own adventure, 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll come back together I'd say in 15 minutes for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up within, I think our target was within 40 minutes, which we seem to be on pace for so far. Sound good? Back together for some Q&A time. So hopefully you've had a chance to explore a few or all of those tools and bring back some questions, comments, or ideas that you have based on what you observed. I'll just say for myself, I use GoFormative and Google Forms on a daily basis for GoFormative for kind of my traditional check for understanding type assessments, and then Google Forms for more to gauge kind of the SEL and how students are doing on a kind of day-to-day basis. And then Poll Everywhere and Mentimeter, I use more for meetings, presentations I have among colleagues or other staff members, just because I'm trying not to overwhelm my students with too many different platforms and too many different things to get used to. And I've just kind of hit my groove with GoFormative and Google Forms in a way that I can pull up existing assessments that are already there. And then I've got some templates existing with Google Forms that I can draw upon. So kind of once I've put the legwork in to develop those templates, it's pretty simple to return to them and adjust from day to day based on individual needs. So would love to hear some folks. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box and then leave obviously the microphone available for folks to ask their questions there. To Greg's question, I believe you can attach individual standards to each question so that when you assess and export that data, it's all pretty well laid out. And I believe they have, from what I've seen, they've got the Common Core standards, they've got the C3 social studies framework, they've got STEM science standards as well. So Common Core, ELA, and math for kind of I'm not sure about some of the elective courses, but I know that for the ones that I've been teaching, science, social studies, math, and ELA, that all those standards have been available. Marjorie, I believe they're already in the system. Again, the ones that I've used have been in the system, but I know that there is an upload option for if you have specific standards that might not be represented, as I know some districts have kind of priority standards kind of within Common Core and even within their electives. Great, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, GoFormative is my go-to. The other ones, like I said, I use in more of a survey or a quiz format, but from a traditional formative assessment standpoint, I'm even thinking of ways when we do get back to normal in class that I'm going to use formative on a more regular basis, just because of the way it sort of crunches the data in a way that's so simple for me to read and do something with. In terms of the devices, I believe they can all, I know Poll Everywhere, Forms, Formative, and I believe Mentimeter can all be used regardless of what kind of device students or staff members are using. They're all mobile friendly. In terms of, I have not tried from a device other than a computer in terms of kind of the back end processing of the data. I think it's probably visible on a mobile device, but more easy to manipulate from a computer. But I know, all these platforms now are kind of needing to be mobile friendly since so many folks are accessing things that way. Yeah, Paula, to your question, the thing I like about GoFormative is how simple it is to process and see the data live as it's coming in. I have that same capability with Google Forms. It's in cells on a spreadsheet, which I can process live, but it's not as simple for me to look at a set of questions like I could in GoFormative and see, on this set of 5 questions about integers, most of the class is having trouble with number 3. I can't see that as easily in kind of the back end when it comes to Google Forms. It's possible, but just kind of personal preference. The visual display of the data on formative is easier for me to manage. Now I know, again, Google Forms, once you create it and you have your spreadsheet and you can sort your data, you can do it live. It's just kind of a personal preference that I've been using formative more often than Google Forms when it comes to strictly academic formative assessment. But again, for daily check-ins and surveys and social emotional things, I've found Google Forms to be easier for me to manage because I can collect the data, look at it, and then follow up with students at a later point in the day. Versus Go Formative, I can see on my screen exactly how students are responding to those questions. I can be making my student groups. I can be making my breakout rooms based on, am I seeing red or green for different question types? Terry, is that a hand up, I think?
Yeah, that's a hand up, Chris. How would classroom teachers get access in a, do you do these workshops with districts to get them to realize what's available? And then could a teacher have all of these in their system? But as individual teachers, I'm assuming they can't, I guess maybe they could do this, but how do teachers get access to these?
They're all free. Mentimeter has kind of a freemium option where you are allowed a certain number of question types within a presentation for free. And then beyond that, I forget if it's the exact numbers. I've been able to get by with the freemium version because I ask a small number of questions. But if you're going to kind of make that a focal point of your formative assessment, it's probably worth springing for the extra account. But formative, Poll Everywhere, and Google Forms are all free enough for teachers to where they can access on their own and not need to work through any, district hierarchy in terms of purchasing software.
How would I even know these four exist? If I weren't on this discussion with you, is this something that's broadly known across the country as districts are trying to outfit themselves for this virtual learning environments that we're in?
Yeah, I don't think these are I don't know that they're very widely known. I know that there's been a lot of scrambling among teachers in the last 6 months to find how do I duplicate what I would ordinarily get in person in a virtual space. And so I know particularly Go Everywhere and Mentimeter had kind of a corporate slant before, and they are rebranding themselves as like, no, we are
teacher
friendly and here's how. So they're locking down privacy. They're making free options available. They're making it simple for teachers to sign up for free, import students for free, and kind of create classes. But I don't think that these are very well known because it isn't until now that we've needed these kinds of tools because I've got to imagine less than 1% of teachers were teaching entirely virtually before March of last year. And now we're all in that boat together. And so I'm finding these things on a professional learning network on Twitter, finding out from teachers, what are you using to keep students engaged, to get, quick formative assessment data that you can turn around quickly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like if CTQ wanted to set up I'm just trying to think of how to make even just this discussion or even a version of this that you could do available so that district level folks or even the chief state school officers could start to advertise this through their systems, because it seems like a huge help. That's just me thinking big time. So
Terry, that's a great idea. Let's follow up on that as we close out the session, because certainly I think making sure that everybody, not just the participants in today's session, knows a little bit about this would be tremendously helpful.
Yeah.
Hey, and Chris, I want to point out some of the questions in the chat box about.
Okay. I see. Yeah. So I've looked. Greg, I've looked at the library for Go Formative, and I like a lot of what's there. But because I've just been using it day to day. I've been creating my own as a means also of kind of getting to know the tool and its capabilities, but also because a lot of what's in there I might use in a more summative sense, but I haven't found anything yet that is directly responsive to my lesson that day and the kinds of questions I was posing. So it's been simpler for me to, write up my own 5 questions that, because again, I'm using this for a snapshot of a check for understanding to see who's got this and is ready to go independently, and then who do I need to work with in a breakout room. So it's been easier so far for me to make my own. But I'm, building a library so far. I'm 6 weeks into the school year. And so the first 5 weeks we were virtual. And so I've got that many days worth of small formative assessments. I'm sharing it with not only my in-building PLC, but my district-wide PLC, since we're all sort of on the same path. So we can all start creating and sharing our formative assessments and building that library up as well. So far for me, it's been 100% creating my own versus using what's available in the library. But I do love that they have a library that I could draw on if I needed to. Above that, Paula, you asked sharing links to the assessment over chat during the class. Depending on the kind of, I have synchronous teaching and I have asynchronous teaching. So if we're doing a session all together, I'll just drop the link into the chat window or into our Google Hangout. And then if it's something asynchronous, that's the link I put into the student's daily planner so that they know it's there when they're ready for it. And, depending, again, depending on when I need the data, do I need it now or can I get it now, but then process it later? I might use a tool in a different way. I like to use Go Formative and Poll Everywhere live. I am comfortable using Google Forms asynchronously. So at the end of the day, here's kind of a 10-question sort of comprehension check for me. Did you get everything done? Did you kind of walk away with the main ideas? Because for me, when I've only got half my class at a time, and the students who are at home today are in here tomorrow, the Google Forms helps give me a quick snapshot of who got their work done, who got the big main ideas, who may have fallen behind. And I'm scrolling, I'm still trying to catch up to everyone's chat. So if I haven't responded to something in the chat window, feel free to let me know and I'll do my best.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris. You said there was a library that you were looking at. Who has that library? A library of videos?
Well, Go Formative has a library of formative assessments that you can draw on. And I just haven't used them yet because I haven't found them to be aligned to what I've been teaching.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, friends. As promised, we try to keep this micro. So we are at our 40-minute mark. I'm going to pass things over to a CTQ colleague who can wrap us up and let us know what's coming next in this series. I'm also going to add my contact information so we can stay in touch. I'm on Twitter, and you can certainly reach out by email if there's any other questions I can answer in this regard. So,
thanks, Chris. That was great.
you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Thanks to all of you for being here. If you would, if you have any final thoughts or questions that you want to log in the chat box, we'll be happy to follow up with you after the session or to be sure that you're directly in touch with Chris. Please do sign up for our next session or pass information along to another colleague or group of colleagues who might benefit from being part of that conversation. We'll be following up with you by email as well, just to be sure you've got the link to sign up. We really appreciate you all being here and look forward to hearing how you use some of this. So also don't be afraid to reach back to us and tell us how it went.